Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Oscars of 1949 for our season. We would. We couldn't get away without talking about the Oscars.
It's so funny. You know what? I usually get the last movie of every single one of our big seasons because I'm usually the only one that cares to like pick the big Oscar-winning film of whatever. And it's like, oh, this time I put our schedule together. I'm like, the big Oscar-winning film is a movie that Allie picked. I'm like, oh, okay.
We're shaking it up here.
I know. We're really, and like, I didn't care about any of these Oscar movies. Like, literally did not care about a single one of them. But
yeah, I kind of agree with you. None of these. Although we'll talk about it in a second. So, Best Supporting Actor went to Walter Huston for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre,
which we're going to talk about in about 2.2. So, hold on to your hats, folks. I think after watching this movie, I agree with that.
Well deserved. I thought he was great. Yeah.
The best performance, I think, in the movie. It had the most subtlety to it. So, and we'll talk about that next.
We sure will.
The Best Supporting Actress is Claire Trevor for Key Largo, another bogey vehicle.
That was on my maybe list for this year, but that's the closest any of these movies got.
Mine too. I actually, I think I pitched it. It was one of the ones that I pitched. Best Screenplay, John Huston for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Okay.
Sure.
Could have used an editor, but fine.
Best Actor, Laurence Olivier for Hamlet.
Ugh.
Of course.
Is this a safe space to say that I hate Hamlet? Much like the play, I hate Hamlet. I think it's lame and boring.
It's overdone. It's
yeah.
Just kind of
well,
but I mean, I guess Laurence Olivier is the pinnacle of Hamlet, right? Every other actor is just chasing his performance.
This is my feeling about Hamlet. Hamlet, when Shakespeare wrote it, Hamlet was never a 4-hour play. Ever, ever, ever. I mean, if you know anything about I had to get into this as a theater major and learn about all the folios and how years after Shakespeare died, much like the Bible, they cobbled it together from actors' memories and all this other kind of stuff. And they put together this play that's 4 hours long. Nobody in the globe would have stood there for 4 hours of Hamlet deciding whether or not to do something or not. I mean, at most... But I mean, that's the play. And I think that if it were, when it's edited, when it's tight, I've seen good productions of Hamlet that I'm like, ooh, that was actually kind of exciting. But they were 2 hours and 10 minutes. They edited a lot of that shit. When Kenneth Branagh was like, I'm doing the whole thing and it's going to be 4 hours. I'm like, you should know better. And it was boring as hell.
Yeah, boy, bye. No, thank you. Mm-mm.
I agree. So, Best Actress went to Jane Wyman for Johnny Belinda.
I know Jane Wyman from Falcon Crest because I watched all those cheesy soap operas in the 1980s.
Well, this movie, I kind of wish it had ended up on our list. It is a bonkers story. So a kind doctor volunteers to tutor a deaf-mute woman, but scandal starts to swirl when his pupil is raped and falls pregnant.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Especially for 1948, that kind of... It sounds bonkers and might actually be really interesting to watch.
I would have watched it. I mean, it's her Oscar win, so I would have been like, okay. Jane Wyman, also the first Mrs. Ronald Reagan.
That's why I know her. I was like, why do I know that name? I kept thinking that she was, I don't know, in a movie that I didn't know. But yes, that's how I know her, because she was the original Mrs. Reagan.
Yep.
I didn't know that Nancy was number 2.
Oh, yeah.
Nancy's number 2 in so many ways.
I mean, we're not going to get into that, but not an upgrade, in my opinion. IMO.
Best Director went to John Huston, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Okay.
So that's number 3. That's
why we're doing this one last. This one was it swept the, I mean, it was this or Hamlet, guys.
Well, speaking of which,
I would have been really sick that day that we recorded Hamlet, I
think. To be there or not to be there? Correct. That is the question.
That is the question.
And rounding out, Best Picture is Hamlet. Wah, wah.
Okay.
Sure.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Hola, compadres.
We don't need no stinking podcast.
We don't need no stinking badges. Welcome back to the Rewind Project. I'm Allie.
I'm Eric.
I'm Matt.
And today we are talking about the treasure of the Sierra Madre, big Oscar winner, probably just heard if you listen to the cold open. And it was a movie. It was quite a movie. And we're going to talk about the high highs and the low lows. And I'm not just talking about the topography. I shouldn't quit my day job is what you should glean from that. This movie was written and directed by a Mr. John Huston, who you may know, and it was based on the 1927 novel of the same name, which, P.S., I will probably not be reading.
Fair.
I mean, maybe the book is better.
Maybe.
Kind of. No.
I don't know. I didn't mind the movie, but we're gonna get into it. It was a movie. It was actually a movie with a capital M, with actual capital M, capital S movie stars in it, and I do like it for that sort of.
Some amazing locales.
Yes. All right, so we're not going to get into this too hard because we literally just talked about it 5 seconds ago, but it was nominated for 4 Oscars, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor, and the only one it didn't win was Best Picture. That went to Hamlet. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It was nominated and won 3 Golden Globes, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actor, so it did win Best Picture for the Golden Globes. And then in 1990, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And what's interesting about this, it was one of the first 50 films to be selected.
So I heard something on the radio the other day that like the Library of Congress just picked their movies for this year. And one of them was like a Terminator movie. And another was like, I mean, so this is not always to say like these are like high art. I mean, not all these movies are Ibsen is what I'm saying. I mean, it's sometimes it's just, again, culturally significant. I guess Arnold, had enough of an impact on the culture that we want to keep this one. Okay.
I would say so. I mean, I've not seen Terminator, but I would say that was like kind of of its time, kind of groundbreaking movie.
Groundbreaking movie and a groundbreaking concept. It gave us Skynet and the idea of an intelligence gaining sentience and kind of destroying mankind. That's an interesting concept. So, yeah, I would say that's culturally significant.
Yeah, but it's not all.
Let me do the chopper.
I'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all the piano and the King's Speech is what I'm saying. It's not.
Yeah, true. This was also number 38 on AFI's list of top 100 movies.
Okay.
And critic Leonard Maltin listed this movie as one of the 100 must-see films of the 20th century. And also the Directors Guild of America called it the 57th, very specific, best directed movie of all time.
Okay.
I don't know what was number 1 on either of those lists. But I thought that was interesting. And we're going to get into a lot more because, as I said to the boys before we started recording, there were so many fun, insane facts for this movie that I had to limit them to 6, or we could have been talking about this for another 2 hours. So I can't wait to get to that part. So it just sounded like this movie was a blast to make. And as we will discuss, about a bunch of men. So men in the 1940s.
Yes.
I'm going to let you fill in the blanks.
Very much a sausage party kind of movie. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. The plot of this movie, 2 down-on-their-luck Americans searching for work in 1920s Mexico convinced an old prospector to help them mine for gold in the Sierra Madre Mountains.
Shenanigans and lots of maniacal laughter ensues. How many scenes did we have of people just laughing like crazy people?
Too many.
All of them.
Yeah, too many.
Yeah. There was at least one person laughing like a crazy person in almost every scene, I would say. And if it wasn't a person laughing, it was a donkey braying. So those are the 2 sounds of the movie. And kind of sometimes they sound alike. All right, we're going to get into this cast. It was not very big, and so we're just going to talk about the 3 main people.
Okay.
But there's lots of things to talk about these 3 main people. So first and foremost, one Mr. Humphrey Bogart as Fred C. Dobbs.
Was really hopeful when this movie started out. I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting into this. And then I don't know if it's the writing or the direction, but then just turned into a very one-note character really quickly and kind of blew the entire load. Like the morality play that this movie was, you knew it was signaled really early, and he turned really quickly. So
yeah, I would agree that he turned really quickly, but like I was thinking about like this whole beginning piece of the movie in Tampico, and this whole story about him getting hoodwinked by some white guy who said, "Come work on my big project for 8 weeks and I'll pay you when we get home." But then they
LOL.
ditched him when they got home. And then it all seemed to be leading up to this thing that they catch him, they go to a bar, the two guys beat him up, and they only take the money that he owed them. And they very specifically take the rest of these $100 bills they could have walked away with, and they throw him down in his face, and they take the money that they were owed, and that's it. So I was like, okay, these are guys, they're capable of violence, they're not afraid of hard work, and they're honest. They take only what they have coming to them, and that's it. And I think that was there just to kind of say, oh, how things change when we get up to the mountains and we're talking about big sums of money. And when that comes into play, then it just kind of, fucks people up.
Because, yeah, that was virtue signal number 1. And then virtue signal number 2 is when he gets the rest of the money so that they can actually do the party, so they can buy all the supplies and stuff. He's like, you know what? We're going to make enough money later that we don't need to worry about it. So showing that he's a generous person and everything. And then immediately when they start collecting money and they get to their sums and like everybody else is ready for 25 grand and he wants, no, I think we need more. I think we need more. And then starts hiding and hoarding his gold, it happened like almost instantaneously when they got up there. There was no shift, anything, nothing built. And so I don't blame Humphrey Bogart. I think it is actually writing and direction. And I already know the end of the movie. So why am I watching this?
I feel like Humphrey, as an actor, he did try to kind of get a little bit of gradations there. Because like you thought he made a pretty blatant switch early on. By the end of this movie, he was full on insane, and so I think in his acting, I think he tried to do that. But you're right. The script wasn't very subtle, and it would have been interesting to see him kind of move there by degrees.
Yes.
Maybe. Sure.
Also, as your hotness correspondent, I found him very unattractive in this movie.
Humphrey Bogart, his attractiveness has always been a mystery to me.
Right?
I mean, I think in Casablanca or something like that, you kind of swoon over him because he's this really swell guy. And also Rick, the owner of Rick's Cafe, is kind of cool, but he's never been hot.
Yeah.
No.
Especially not with pants up to his armpits. So
no, and it's just like...
and mud all over his face. And
this movie was so dirty. Like, I have a friend who categorizes movies as like clean or dirty, and not in a violence or language setting, but just like all of these characters looked so sweaty and dirty and just like what they must smell like, and how many weeks did it go before they had any sort of like shower? Ugh.
Well, I mean, they were not showering out there anyways. You knew that. I mean, there's no room for it. It's plus you need all the water to get the gold. So
that was a very good impression of a prospector, man. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I think Humphrey Bogart was fine. We're going to talk about the ins and outs of this particular character because he did quite literally jump off of the other side of the mountain. But I was much more interested in all of the other characters in this movie than I was Fred C. Dobbs.
And yet he was the point. And it's the point, and it was so on the nose. I mean, I almost wish that, even though this is a really great monologue, Howard, who we're going to talk about next, has this big monologue at the beginning of the movie that I've seen gold really make people go crazy. And as soon as he said it, I was like, is that the movie we're about to watch?
Right.
Is them going to go up in the mountains, and then one of them's going to, or both of them are going to, or all three of them are going to go nuts. And it just turned out to be just Dobbs. But, the movie was all laid out for you. It's like, this is what it's going to be. And I don't know. I wonder if it would have been more interesting if we didn't see it coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah. Especially with Fred Dobbs there saying that, no, I would take what I want. It wasn't going to change me because money's money. It just depends on the person, which I guess was true, but he didn't really know himself very well because he changed so quickly. It was a 180.
And yet he did seem to be, I mean, he was a person who he was begging on the street, but because he had to, he wanted to work. As soon as somebody offered him a job, he took it like right away. He didn't know he was being hoodwinked out of all that money. And again, he had thousands of dollars in his hand and he took the $300 that was owed him, and that was it. And so he was, I mean, I think there is something, I think the movie wanted us to think that there's something about being out there in the wilderness away from civilization where the rules start to not apply anymore. And then the prospect of like really, really big money, like money that these guys had never dreamed of. And they all turn into Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, but he was really the only one that did. I mean, so I don't know. I would think I would have really enjoyed an actual slow burn of him coming to this realization.
Right.
And we just didn't get it. Instead, we got shenanigans with the indigenous people and with the pirate, or not pirates, but the bandits and
Banditos, los banditos.
it was kind of nonsense. Like it didn't contribute to the story of Fred C. Dobbs, really. It was just some other stuff that could happen to them while they were out there.
But you know, the part of the movie that I really did like is that guy Cody showed up, because he freaked me the fuck out. And then,
I thought he was going to go. I thought it was going to be like a big massacre. I don't know. I was on the edge during that whole part of the movie.
And then I was not prepared for that letter from his widow. That was like, oh, that's interesting. Like that went in a direction I did not see coming. And then at the end where it's like, let's give some money to the widow. And of course, by that point, Fred C. Dobbs like, are you crazy? My money.
Well, had certain circumstances not happened to the next character, I kind of expected at the end of the film that he would end up with the widow, is because what Cody had is what Howard wanted. I mean, because he sat there.
Oh no, you're talking about Curtin.
I'm sorry, not Howard. Bob Curtin wanted. So,
and in my head, Curtin did end up with the widow, didn't he? Isn't he going to go visit her?
Yes.
And look at all the fruit trees.
Oh,
right, because
okay.
he went off about the peaches for a long time.
Yep.
Yes, he did.
Well, let's get into these other characters. So Oscar winner Walter Huston, a.k.a. John Huston's dad, as Howard. There was a lot of hesitation on both sides, both Walter and John's side, to cast a family member in this role, and Huston wasn't sure and John wasn't sure, but they both have said, in their memoirs and stuff, that it was one of the best times of their lives and they loved working with each other. And John Huston was just so thrilled that his dad got an Oscar from this. So
is Walter Huston a Nepo daddy?
I guess so. I mean, I feel like he was pretty established in his own right.
He was. And actually, we've seen him before. He was in that horrible Agatha Christie film that we watched, and then there were none.
Oh, that's right. He was much more enjoyable.
So much better in this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw this really cute, I was doing a little bit of research on YouTube. As I do, I go to YouTube and I just put in the title of the movie and I'm like, what do you got? And Angelica Houston was talking about this movie, and it was really kind of touching because she was born a couple years after this movie came out. And she never knew her grandfather. So she's like, the only way I really got to know my grandfather was watching him perform. When you look at this character compared to like other things he played, it's like, yes, he's warm and witty and he's funny and all the things you see in Sierra Madre, but then you see other performances of his and you realize he's a really good actor.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really, really good. And I tell you, I saw a picture of him winning his Oscar in his, with clean shaven face and a tuxedo. And I was like, oh, that's very different. Like he,
a little zaddy.
As it should be. I mean, a little bit of zaddy energy, not really that, not so much attractive. It's just like, he just cleaned up really nice. And it just kind of underscored this thing. He's a good actor. I mean, he's really not Prospector Pete in real life.
I kind of felt like, either this part was written for him or he was made for this part, because he was really good in this movie. Really, really good. Even when he does his crazy laughter dance, like you're kind of really enjoying
he was the
moment.
first one to laugh like a crazy person, and I believed it coming from him, and I believed it at the end too when he did it again. I mean, he was just really good at it. Humphrey Bogart's maniacal evil laughter, I was just like, oh, stop it. You're no Walter Huston.
You're no Walter Huston. He shows up on the scene in the movie. I was like, I don't know about this like hokey, folksy guy. But he really made himself invaluable to the two of them, as greenhorns. And I don't know. I really like the evolution, and I love the ending where he is going to go back to the tribe and be treated like a god, and maybe have some have a wife and live in a hammock and be fed fruit. I don't know. I like that outcome a lot.
He deserved all that he ended up with. So
yeah, I agree. Howard 2024. Is Walter Huston as old as Joe Biden? Question mark. Unclear.
He was only 65 when he made this movie.
Okay, so there we go. No. And last but not least, the hottie of the moment, Tim Holt as Bob Curtin, the other greenhorn, along with Fred C. Dobbs.
The one who didn't lose his soul.
He was a cutie patootie. Maybe because he was attractive. Maybe that's why he didn't lose his soul.
He had more prospects, is what you're saying?
Matt coming strong with the dad joke. I liked him. I thought he was a good levity character against Humphrey Bogart. And, I like that he just wanted to, he didn't have like any sort of deep goals in life. That sounds like a knock, but it's not. He just, he wanted to have his own orchard and settle down with a nice woman and, have some kids and just,
And in 1925, 25,000 can do that for you. So he was good. Yeah. I mean, he didn't have, he didn't just get gold fever and it just didn't, eat his soul away. He just seemed like a, genuinely good guy. And it really became clear as the movie went on, Dobbs and Curtin did not know each other well. When they, we knew that. We actually see them meet at the very beginning of the movie. But, they worked on that, guys. I don't even know what they were doing, working out in the hot sun in the middle of the
building
field.
Something or,
whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
But, they were not the same. And they became very, very different later on. I will say, in terms of the writing, what I really liked about Bob Curtin was that there were these scenes that were really important that they never got referred to again. And I'm kind of glad they didn't get referred to again. Like when Dobbs was like, "You've been wanting to kill me all along." And I was like, dude, he saved your life. Like literally. He could have just let you die in the mine. And I was waiting for Bob to say, "But I saved your life." And he didn't.
Same, I totally was.
And he didn't. And I'm kind of glad that he didn't, because it's more interesting when you're, as an audience, you're involved in it and you think it for them. And he doesn't have to say it because they were both there when he saved his life. So it kind of doesn't need to be like, it's a stupid thing to say anyway. And I loved the scene with the Gila monster. That was fabulous. And that whole, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. Reach in there, get that treasure. Or are you Yella? Are you? So, I mean, Curtin he had a soul and he didn't like lose all sense of morality, but he was not like a pushover, and at the end, after, Dobbs thought he'd killed him, he was like, "Oh, I'm getting him and I'm getting him back for this." And he was going to kill him. Like there was no, like, he was like, he has crossed the line and now we're done. And so he had a backbone. I liked Curtin. I think he was interesting. He was complex.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think he was supposed to be the character that the audience was supposed to identify the most with throughout the movie. And so it's their point of view that you're supposed to kind of watch Dobbs through, essentially. So yeah, I felt that way because you're sitting there as Dobbs is losing his mind and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And just like Bob was. So because even Howard, as much as I enjoyed him as a character, he was a caricature a lot of times. And I don't know that the audience themselves would be able to identify with him. So Bob was the anchor for that purpose. So I really did enjoy him.
Howard knew more than you or I or Allie would. If we ended up going prospecting in the mountains, we'd be more like Dobbs and Curtin. We'd be like, I don't know anything. I'd be pouring water all over the fool's gold too, going, we're rich, because they were idiots.
Well, I mean, I have a little experience with this. I don't believe in manual labor, but my mom wanted to go digging for diamonds. So we went digging for diamonds in Arkansas, and it is very similar to Sierra Madre, where you like just dig up a bunch of dirt and then you put it in the water. And so when I was watching this movie, I did feel like I would be a really shitty prospector, is basically what I'm saying. Because I was glad that we did it for my mom, but I was not interested in I'm not interested in ever doing that again. It was a lot of like freezing cold water and digging rocks, which no thank you.
Yep.
I would be the burro wrangler. That's what I would be.
I mean, I don't know. I'd be the good time girl in the town, I guess, because at least I don't have to really do anything. I'm inherently lazy, is what I'm saying. All right, we touched on this a bit, but we're going to get into it a little bit deeper. But as I texted you all, I just felt like this was just The Shining set in the mountains of Mexico, because he definitely had that sort of Jack Nicholson turn where he just, out of the circumstances, just went completely insane. It's not as compelling, obviously, as The Shining for reasons that we've already talked about. But when I did my little research, which is just reading a lot of articles, some film critics had said that this movie is about greed. And some people say that, and other film critics say that it's about character. So what do you all think? I thought it was more about greed, but when I was reading the arguments that it's about character, I was like, and maybe they're tied together. I don't know.
I'm wondering if this is a little bit more biblical. I mean, so the love of money is the root of all evil, per the Bible. So
is that Bible or is that Shakespeare?
No, it is.
Okay.
The love of money is the root of all evil. Don't ask me which verse it is.
I really know nothing about the Bible.
We can Google that.
I mean, you're talking to two wrong people, so.
But I think that's kind of what the basis of this was. I think he started just kind of loving the idea of money and what it was going to do. And that's where his turn started to go. It's a lot easier when you don't have a whole lot of money, it is a lot easier to be a little bit more generous at a point, because you don't have much to lose when you don't have much. You know what I mean? So when you have a lot more, and maybe that's why you got a lot of billionaires that are clinging to it and trying to take it from everybody else, it's a little harder maybe to be generous because you stand to lose a lot more when you are. So I don't know, maybe that's the point.
I think it's partly about greed, but I also think it's that thing that I said before. It's also about removing yourself from civilization and being out there in the wilderness, and the old laws of civilization just start not to apply to you anymore. And that there are just some people, the whole thing about it being about character, obviously this place had this effect on Dobbs and it did not have the same effect on Curtin. So it does depend a little bit on who you are and who you were when you showed up. I would like to believe that I would be more Curtin and less Dobbs, because I'd be like, get me back to civilization now. Like, I need running water, would be my, but when you're out there and, and like there are Gila monsters and there are, banditos and there are tiger cats. We never saw them, but whatever they are, I don't think they're like big orange and white and black tigers like we saw in the Jungle Book, but some kind of big,
maybe a mountain lion,
some kind of big mountain cat that can eat you. I mean, when you're that, it's a different kind of mindset that kind of takes over, and who reverts back to that less than civilized place.
So I guess you bring up a good point that, Bob never really turned. So either he's not a greedy person by nature, or he just has stronger character. So, does it really have to be one or the other, or is it just a combination of both? Just two ways of looking at the same problem.
And it's how you define success. For him, success would be settling down with a nice girl and owning a fruit orchard and, hiring people to send in the harvest and playing guitar until midnight. That's his view of a perfect life. And I think that, Dobbs just got, just obsessed with this idea of being the wealthiest person he'd ever met in his life.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. Because he started talking about buying suits and things like that,
I wonder too, he is the type of person that felt, as a poor person, that he never got the respect that he deserved. And so, when you think about the things that he wanted to look nice. He wanted to have a nice suit. He wanted people to respect him. And, it's just something that he never got pre-gold.
Yeah, he asked for money for a meal and he went and spent it at the barbershop.
Yeah,
right.
Actually,
so when you think about what Bob was looking for versus what Fred was looking for, you already started to see that a little bit at the beginning, like how their paths might turn. And as my father likes to say, when we talk about those big lottery amounts, 400 million, 500 million, he likes to say that kind of money will ruin your life, because it's so much money and it's such a burden. And, you have all of these people that come out of the woodwork wanting that kind of money.
So the stories about people who've won the lottery and it fucked them up are legion.
Yeah. And so, I was thinking about that too. I always like to put myself in the perspective of the movie if it's applicable. But, you know, just even thinking about having that kind of money and the responsibility that it gives you, you know, especially in the 1920s when that kind of, you know, they're talking $25,000. Well, that's several $1,000s now. And, you know, in probably maybe even $1 million.
Oh, it's millions of dollars now. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, too, that Fred wanted that respect and he thought that the money was going to give him respect versus being a respectful person.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned The Shining. The Shining, you know, it's really about this place, right? You know, that, you know, that Jack Nicholson goes there and it's the surroundings. And I guess I'm kind of saying the same thing in terms of the wilderness, but, you know, this hotel really turns him. The movie that this really reminded me of, have you guys ever seen Dogville? Okay. I hesitate to endorse Dogville. I love this movie. Everyone else hates it. And I'm totally okay with that. People are allowed to hate it. But it's got this stacked cast. It's Nicole Kidman, Lauren Bacall, David Strathairn, Chloe Sevigny, Patricia Clarkson. It's an amazing cast of people. And Nicole Kidman plays this woman who stumbles into this mountain town that's literally got one road and it's between these two mountains and there's like 20 people that live here. And it's called Dogville. And when she's just a stranger on the road and she's like, can somebody take me in and I can do menial work for you? They're like, fine. And they're like all dirt poor, lovely people. And halfway through the movie, somebody comes through and tacks up a wanted poster on the wall and it's got Nicole Kidman's face on it. And they're like, she robbed a bank or something. And everyone knows she didn't rob the bank because the day that the bank was robbed, she was in Dogville and they all knew it because she'd been there for months at this point. But they realize now that they have power over her and they become awful. I mean, they just become the most evil people. And it's kind of about like when you get absolute power, like out of nowhere, and you feel really powerless to begin with, like Dobbs did, it's just a really bad combo. So, you know, whether it's money or power or if they're the same thing, and if Dobbs thought they were the same thing, but this movie and also just the mountain setting of the whole thing, and also Dogville's kind of your friend would call it a dirty movie because it's just, you know, although it's so interesting, it's filmed on this big soundstage. It's obviously a soundstage. Like it's so fakey looking, but it does it because it's very theatrical. And I love it. Everyone else hates it. Faye's going to listen to this and be like, oh, 3 hours of my life that I'll never get back. Faye never forgave me.
I don't know. I'm into it. You're describing it really well. Like I'm like, oh, I love shit like this.
I love this movie. And it had lots of echoes of Dogville for me. So if you like this one, listeners, you'll definitely like Dogville. And even if you didn't like this one so much, I recommend it, but don't hate me if you hate it.
Fair. Another thing that we've already kind of touched on, and I actually didn't think about this when I was writing this outline because it wasn't obvious to me the way that you've laid it out, Eric, and I think that's really good, both you and Matt. But, you know, I was like, was he always untrustworthy? Was it the gold? But, you know, your examples of how he was pre-movie, I didn't even think about, you know, showing his morality in that way. I just thought of it as, you know, things that just happened pre-gold. But I think you're right. I think he wasn't untrustworthy until the gold, which makes it so much more jarring.
It was a little vain. Like there were elements of that, but not, it wasn't full bore until he had what he thought was the power to do all this. And then he just went nuts with it. And if he could have had all three of their golds, he would have taken it because it was like
100%.
He was full on nuts at that point.
Yeah. Like the paranoia and the, you know, almost like the voices talking to himself. It just was, it's very like, those are very clear symptoms of, you know, a paranoid episode. All right. Well, we're going to talk now about Mexico. The Treasure of Sierra Madre was one of the earliest Hollywood productions to be shot on location outside of the United States. It was shot in Tampico, where you see at the beginning of the film where they are, and also in Durango, in the state of Durango, in the mountains. So I thought that was cool. And of course, I took to Google Maps because I was like, how far is it from Tampico to Durango? And it's far. It's very far. I'm not so great with the geography of Mexico and where things are and the distances between. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing that in the 1920s, when you're not flying or driving, it would take you a really long time. Because it felt like it took them a really long time, but I was like, is this just movie magic? But no, it's very, Tampico's all the way over on the East Coast.
They took a train. So. They were on that train for a while, so that's cool. Mm-hmm.
Well, they took a train and then they were hiking for like 8 million years. So I thought that
And
was
Howard
kind of
was
interesting.
booking up that mountain. I thought it was so funny. I love that. That was so great.
I would be that way. I would not be booking up any mountain. So yeah, there's a lot of actual Mexicans, so that is good. It's not white people portraying Mexicans. But how did you all? I know none of us are
Natalie
Mexicans, so we
Wood was
can't
not
really.
in this movie.
Yikes. Yeah, everybody who is, well, for the most part, we're going to get into a couple of instances where that was not true. But, and I know none of us are Mexican, but how did you all feel about the portrayal of the Mexicans, both the bandidos and then obviously the indigenous people in the tribes? Did you feel, was it a cringe moment for you guys?
Surprisingly, no. I was actually kind of okay with it. I mean, the bandidos were not great people, but the federales were also Mexican. And it was very clear that the Mexican people who lived in these towns did not like the bandidos. I mean, when he went into town that one time, they caught 2 of them and took them right to the graveyard, made them dig their own graves and shot them in the head. So clearly, like, the bandidos were not all of Mexico. And I don't know, for me, I don't know much about what indigenous, I mean, my feeling about Mexico has always been that their native tribes were basically the Aztecs and the Incas and the Mayans, but they weren't wiped out because of genocide. They just integrated with the Europeans, and now there really aren't any, pure, I even hate that language when talking about genetics, but I mean, there aren't any like full Aztec, Mayans, or Incas left, but they're all just descendants of the people who are now what we call Mexican. So when they referred to that whole village as Indians, I was like, okay, I didn't really understand. Is that the same thing as a Native American, kind of, or not really? I wasn't really sure. But that culture, I thought they treated very respectfully. So I have to say, I expected, because all I knew about this movie when I started was, I don't need to show you no stinking badges. That was it. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a lot of yikes. And I have to say, I thought it was pretty even-handed. I mean, yes, the bandidos were awful, but the Mexicans all thought they were awful. And I thought, oh, okay. Okay. And if anybody is terrible in this movie, it's the Americans who showed up in Mexico, don't even own the land, go up there stealing gold from a country that's not even theirs, and they're just going to take it back, smuggle it over the line, and they're going to be rich. I mean, if anybody in this movie you want to poke holes at and say this entire culture is bad, the Americans fare no better than the Mexicans do. So even Steven, for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I didn't really have, one, I don't really know enough about the culture, especially at this time. So like, I couldn't say whether it was accurately portrayed or not. You know what I mean? So I like, historically, I don't dress and stuff like that. I don't know that I could point to a point and say, hey, no, that was inaccurate. So I agree with Eric on that. And the Americans were really the most terrible part of the movie. So I can't really complain about that either, because that's accurate. So
I agree with you. I really thought that I was going to just be there with the cringe emoji face for most of the movie, but I really wasn't. And I again, like you said, Matt, I'm not Mexican. I don't know enough whether or not to say that it was 100% accurate or whatever. But I thought that it was treated a lot better, especially in 1948, than I expected it to be, for sure.
Yes.
And I really did like the moment when Howard said we have to close up the wounds on the mountain. Like, we have to, he knew a lot about the culture, and he seemed to be, somebody who, through him, I know he's a white guy, clearly, but through him, we kind of got a respect for the culture that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And he also knew, like, why the Indians were saying, you have to come back with us.
Yes.
Like, he understood all of that. And through him, I kind of appreciated a lot about and obviously he hated the bandidos, but to my earlier point, so did everybody else. So
right.
Yeah.
I just like the word bandito. I like saying bandito. All right, y'all ready for some bananas fun facts?
Hit me.
Always.
Okay. You're going to die, is all I have to say. Wait till I get to the last one. You're going to fall on the floor. Okay, so first up, Blazing Saddles refers to this film with the misquoted line, "We don't need no stinking badges." And then one of my favorite movies of all time, UHF, with Weird Al Yankovic, fucking amazing, misquotes that same misquote with "I don't need no stinking badgers," which is how I know the line because I watched UHF before I watched any of these other movies.
Okay.
So. It's like an animal. He has a TV show and it's like an animal thing, and I don't need no stinking badgers. Go watch UHF. I might watch UHF this weekend. Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan has cited the film as one of his personal favorites and has said that Dobbs was a key influence in creating the character of Walter White.
I can see it. Although, to Matt's point, Walter was a little bit more subtle in his gradations toward becoming from mild-mannered chemistry teacher to drug lord. Was not a instant switch.
Yeah, I lasted one season for Breaking Bad and then I couldn't. Wasn't for me. Blow Your Mind Part 1. A few notable uncredited actors appeared in the film. First off, in an opening cameo, the director and screenwriter, John Huston, is pestered for money by Bogart's character, directed by Bogart.
Oh, so Humphrey Bogart directed him when the camera was pointed at him?
Yes.
That's funny.
Oh, interesting.
So the man in the white suit is the director.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
Which it's kind of interesting because you never really see you sort of see his face, but you don't, like, it's all very kind of trick of the camera. And then this one totally blew my mind. Robert Blake also appears as a young boy selling lottery tickets.
You could have put a gun to my head and said, "Where is Robert Blake in this movie?" And I would never have guessed that he was that little boy.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if I did the math, I would have figured out that he would have to be a child, but never.
No.
Never in a million years.
I mean, I thought that boy was Mexican.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So did I.
And is Robert Blake Mexican? I mean, did he change his name? He might be Mexican. Who knows? He might have been a little Mexican little boy before he changed his name and went to Hollywood. I mean, I don't know.
Unclear, but bananas. Okay. As production dragged, Bogart, an avid yachtsman, didn't know that, was getting increasingly anxious about missing the Honolulu race in which he usually took part. Despite assurances from the studio that his work would be done by then, he pestered Huston about finishing in time. Eventually, Huston grabbed Bogart by the nose and twisted hard. Bogart never again asked him to confirm when shooting was expected to finish.
This was clearly before the SAG-AFTRA strike because
they just must have been like so drunk on this movie. It must have been like Shenanigans Central. An inspiration for Paul Thomas Anderson when he was making There Will Be Blood. Again, Dobbs.
I hate that movie.
Do you? I love that movie.
Oh, Faye and I call it There Will Be Acting. I mean, it's so...
Yes. So Dobbs and what's his face's character?
I don't think I've ever seen There Will Be Blood.
I drink your milkshake. I don't get it. I drink it
up.
So stupid.
I maybe need to watch it again. But anyway, it came out in 2007, so I may need to watch it again.
Also a very dirty film.
Very dirty. Okay. The most bananas fun fact, maybe of all time. This might be the most bananas fun fact we have ever had on this podcast. It's a little long, but stay with me. While on location, John Huston took a little Mexican boy named Pablo under his wing. When it came time for Huston to close up shop in Mexico, he chose to adopt Pablo and brought him back to the United States to live with him and his second wife, actress Evelyn Keyes. You would think that Huston would have prepared Keyes for their new family member, but he didn't. That oversight precipitated their divorce a short time later. She found out about it when she picked him up at the airport. Pablo was educated in the United States and eventually got married and had 3 children, but later Pablo deserted his family, returned to Mexico City, and became a used car salesman.
Okay.
What? I want that story.
Right.
Like HBO, do that movie.
And I guess Angelica then would have been his younger sister?
Yeah.
All right. But I don't think Evelyn was Angelica's mom. I don't know who Angelica's mom was.
No, she left very shortly after this. And they were apparently John Huston was a real shit to Evelyn Keyes in the little research that I did. So it was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. But can you imagine adopting, well, first of all, can you imagine just adopting a random orphan that's on your set, A, and then B, bringing this orphan home and not telling your wife about it.
Well, the first part's a lovely thing to do, but it's rather irresponsible if you're just going to, surprise, you have a kid.
Wait a minute. Angelica was raised with him then, because he stayed, got married, and had 3 kids in the United States. So they were siblings growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if Pablo was in the United States that whole time, I mean, again, maybe neither one of them lived with their dad. I don't know. Pablo must have lived with John, but I don't know. He didn't live with Evelyn. I don't know if Angelica had much of a relationship with her dad growing up. I have no idea.
That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
That is nuts. Like, that only happens in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure. But you're right. I do need that movie.
I do need that.
I mean, again, I could go on and on and on. There were just a lot of really, really fascinating fun facts with this movie. Okay, game time.
Game time.
Game time. This is called Western Revival. We are reviving this movie for 2023. You're casting the 3 main characters. Who's writing it, who's directing it, and how are you updating this for a more modern audience? All right, Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. My cast is going to be, my Fred C. Dobbs is going to be Chris Pines. Okay. I want somebody who is attractive, he can play nice, he can play mean. I think Chris Pines is actually a really underrated actor.
I agree.
Really funny when he needs to be. So I think he actually could play a good Fred Dobbs, and I feel like he can give us the wide range, and we're going to change the script so it is a slow burn from beginning to end. My Howard is going to be Harrison Ford. I just watched Dial of Destiny, and Harrison's up there. He's up there. He's really starting to have that old man appeal, and I think he could be a wonderful Howard in this. He's got a good sense of humor and too, and I think that would be kind of delightful to actually see him as an old man, and I think he's starting to embrace it in movies.
Have you seen Shrinking on Apple TV?
No,
he is just a dusty old curmudgeon in that. He's hilarious.
So let's bring it to the big screen then. And then my Bob Curtin is going to be Justice Smith. I don't know if you guys saw the Pokemon Detective Pikachu.
No, you can just stop with Pokemon. I've not seen it, no.
Okay. Or you probably didn't see the Dungeons and Dragons film with Chris Pines in it.
Sure didn't, no.
Good movie. A lot of fucking fun.
I read that. I did hear that, but
it was a really
well done movie. You don't need to know a thing
about
Dungeons and Dragons to enjoy this movie. It's just a fun little romp.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you do know a lot about it, there's a lot of Easter eggs for you. And they did a really wonderful job with this movie. But Justice Smith plays in that as one of the band of thieves of Chris Pine, because Chris Pine's in that movie too. And so he's a very sympathetic kind of actor. He plays very sympathetic characters, and so and he's younger. So I kind of want my my Bob to be a little bit younger. And so that the audience might relate to him a little bit more in some respects, especially younger audiences. I'm going to have Ridley Scott direct this. I think he does well with character pieces and big sweeping movies. And we are definitely going back to Mexico to film this, because that was one of the best parts of this movie for me, is seeing those vistas. And I think Ridley Scott is really good with stuff like that. I want the 2 women who wrote Women Talking, though, to write this movie. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I didn't, but I know what it's about.
It's so good. Are you going to call this one Men Talking?
We could rename it.
Lots of men
talk too much.
Talking.
But it was Sarah Polley and Miriam Toews. And the script is really great. It is a good slow burn. You have a lot of character development. You've got a lot of reason that comes through dialogue. And so I think they'd be really good at writing this movie and having a progression of character development throughout the film. I'm going to eliminate a lot of the fluff that we don't need. I want it to be about 3 people out in the wilderness, and the one's slow descent into crazy town, and the other 2 how they have to deal with it. That's what I want to do. I want to make the movie smaller in some respects, and so that's how I tackle it.
I love it. I'm into it. All right, Eric.
Okay, I'm actually going to start with my writer-director because this is kind of where I would go if I was doing Sierra Madre today. I would amp up the horror aspect of this movie. I'd make it scarier. Like, not only is Dobbs a reason to be scared, but Gila monsters and mountain lions and a lot of other things are give you lots of reason to be scared too. When Cody shows up, I'd want him to be really fucking scary. And just, and have an audience that's on the edge of their seat. And for me, like, one of the best horror people these days is Ari Aster, the guy behind Midsummer and Heredity.
Oh yeah.
And so it would be
perfect.
written and directed by Ari Aster. My Dobbs, I was like, I need someone who can be evil and crazy. So Adam Driver, what are you doing? Here you are. Did you see that thing?
Very good Dobbs.
Did you see that thing, by the way, where somebody asked Adam Driver if his face was a detriment to his career? Like, first of all, what kind of fucking question is that? And secondly, you're talking to somebody who's been nominated for 2 Academy Awards and has been in like a million hit movies. Clearly, the answer is no. Shut up. Like,
right.
Dumb. Like,
besides, he's got shoulders for days. I mean,
yes.
Come on.
Like Matt, I wanted to add a little bit of diversity to the cast, not in terms of gender, but I wanted to cast Lakeith Stanfield as Curtin.
Oh, I love him.
I love him too. He's so good. And I think it would be interesting to kind of take a look at, we were still like knee deep in segregation in the 1920s. And so why would a Black American want to go down to Mexico? I think that would be an interesting kind of character journey for him and give him a little bit more of an interesting backstory, because we never really do find out why these guys are down there. I mean, they didn't go there to look for gold. That's what they end up doing once they're there. But, I kind of, it would be interesting to give them a reason. And then when I saw that Dobbs was such a inspiration for Walter White, I was like, ooh, I want Bryan Cranston in this movie. So I'm going to have him as Howard.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Because he knows, perfect. I mean, he would know how to be in that kind of horror-ish version of this movie because of Breaking Bad, but also, he was in Malcolm in the Middle. He knows comedy. He's really, really, I think he can do both of those really, really well. So yeah, that's my new Sierra Madre.
Okay, well, as usual, I went in a totally different direction. So I like how we're all very different, even though we don't even talk about it. We just happen to be. So I am reviving this movie, but I am taking a movie that was sort of a pseudo-scary, pseudo-Western, Jordan Peele's Nope. So I am taking the cast of Nope, mostly, with a little bit of help, which I'll get to in a second. So my Dobbs is going to be Keke Palmer.
Okay.
Yes, it's a different direction, but I feel like she's got the chops to do it. And I look forward to seeing what she could do as a woman, as a Black woman in this sort of role, because I'm going to add some estrogen into the mix. There's not really anybody old enough in Nope, so I'm going to take Bradley Whitford from Get Out and put him as Howard.
Okay.
Again, I think he could use a vehicle where he really shines, and he's so good in Handmaid's Tale, and I find him a fabulous actor. My Bob is going to be Daniel Kaluuya. They're going to be together. And then I am going to be casting, my Cody is going to be Stephen Ewan. So, because I feel like he didn't get a big enough part in Nope, and I love him, and I think he's such a talented actor. So we're going to rework the cast of Nope and a little bit of Get Out. So it is going to be written and directed by Mr. Jordan Peele, because he understands these actors and he's obviously worked with them before, and in some cases multiple times. So, and how I'm going to update it is obviously the cast is much updated. But like you, Eric, I did want to make it, I think, a little bit scarier, and maybe not like a jump scare sort of way, but I think there's a lot of psychological scariness that can be, you're in a desolate area, you're in the middle of the Mexican mountains, you've got these banditos, you've got unwelcome guests, you've got crazy animals, and I think that that all can be ramped up a little bit. All right, well, we've reached the time in our episode where we are going to be talking about, are we skip renting or buying this movie? Skip means I wish I had never seen it. Screw the banditos. Rent means I'm kind of glad that maybe I went prospecting for gold, but it's probably not for me. And buy means I'm going to take this $25,000 and fuck y'all. So, Eric, on a skip, rent, or buy, where'd you lean on this one?
I am a very strong rent on this one. I mean, I do love old movies. I like the fact that now I can say that I've seen this one because I've heard of it. You know, I definitely is something that's out there in the zeitgeist for people who love old movies. I think I saw it. I don't know that I'm going to see much more if I watched it again. Again, I think it was pretty on the nose. Some of the on the nose moments, like the letter from the widow, I actually really liked, but a lot of them I just thought, okay, let's not beat us over the head with this, you know, this thing that you've got going. So yeah, I'm pretty clear that I'm happy that, Allie, that you prompted me to watch this movie. I appreciated it more than I enjoyed it. I did not enjoy watching this movie. I was deeply uncomfortable throughout, but I think you were supposed to be, so I'm a rent.
All right, Matt.
It took me 4 tries to get through this film. Listeners, please, I am not a cinephile. I have no training in being a cinephile or a movie critic. So take whatever I say as a grain of salt. I know there's a lot of people out there that really love this movie, people who are far more educated in film than myself, but I would skip this. As an average viewer, I didn't really enjoy it. I could see everything coming a mile away, and the resolution wasn't satisfying. The movie itself wasn't satisfying. And the performance of Fred Dobbs by Humphrey Bogart there, it was just kind of over the top, and there was no subtlety to it. And I did not enjoy this film in any respect. So except for the cinematography, I loved the vistas and the setting of the movie, but that was really about it. So I would say still.
Yeah, I'm also solid rent. I mean, I chose it just because it sounded kind of interesting, and I had also heard about sort of the legendary Sierra Madre, and so I am glad that I watched it. I definitely think it could have been a tight 90 instead of 2 hours. There was a lot that could have been edited out, and I had to kind of watch this in shifts while on a business trip, so it wasn't the greatest environment, but you know, it kept my interest over, you know, through a couple of viewings, and I am glad that I saw it, but I will probably never watch it again. All right, and that, my friends, is a wrap on Rewind Project Season 5.
Woohoo! It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
I feel like this year in particular, we have had some high highs and some low lows in our movie choices for sure. But we are very excited to be back here again for Season 6. I can't even believe that, in 2024. And keep an eye out. We'll be choosing those movies shortly, coming to your ears pretty soon. So have a wonderful holiday, everybody. And I'm Allie.
I'm Eric.
I'm Matt.
And be kind, rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.